Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Austin here, and I'm so excited you're tuning in. Whether you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, would you do me a favor before the episode even starts? Like this podcast, subscribe to it, leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or on YouTube. I would love to know how this is encouraging you, how this is helping you, or if you just want to ask a question, I would love to hear that too. If you don't like it, please feel free to leave a bad review. Please leave some hate comments on my YouTube videos. Those are actually my favorite, and they all boost the algorithm. So please do either or. I'm totally fine with that. But again, welcome back to the episode. I'm excited for today. What I'm going to give you today, I'm just going to dive right into it, is something that I have preached probably multiple times over the last couple of months, whether that's been to, it started in my youth ministry. I've been to a couple of events where I've preached this message. I've preached little pieces of this at some FCA gatherings, some other things. So anyway, I want to give the full teaching right here, right now on the podcast today. I'm excited for it, and I think it'll truly be helpful to you as a listener today. Here's the main idea. We're going to go to Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. And the main idea I really want to communicate today is this: 3 reasons why Christians leave the faith early. You see, I think we have a problem in 2026, not just 2026, but when life gets hard, when following Jesus isn't easy, we just bow out. We quit. And so I want to give you 3 reasons. I want to help diagnose 3 reasons why people might leave the faith early and how we can combat those 3 things. So let's read Hebrews chapter 12. I got my Bible with me. You know, I got my Bible. I've had this Bible since Bible college. I've been preaching with it every week since then. It's the NASB version because I had a Bible college professor say, this is just how Jesus dictated it. I don't think that's entirely true, but I liked it. So here we are, Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. It says this: Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, which he's referring to Hebrews chapter 11, in which the author gives what we call the great hall of faith. And it's just person after person from the Old Testament who remained faithful, who lived a hard life. Even though some of them didn't even see the promises of God come to pass, they still were faithful to God. So he says, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, we have so many great examples that have gone before us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us. That word encumbrance just means weight. It could also, well, I'll talk about it here in a little bit. And it says, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. That's Hebrews chapter 12, 1 through 3. Here are the 3 things that I think this passage identifies, diagnoses to help us continue to follow Jesus. And you got to remember, this was really, this letter of the Hebrews was written to Hebrew Christians. It was written to these people who were following Jesus, and they'd been going through intense persecution. And the author is trying to encourage them, don't quit now. And he appeals to this race-like imagery, this competition imagery, in order to communicate what he wants to communicate. Here is the first thing that he tells us. Well, one of the first things in verse 1. And this is what I think you need to do, and this is why I think many Christians bow out of faith early. Number 1, many Christians bow out of faith early because they do not drop the weight that they're carrying. He tells us this in verse number 1. Let us lay aside every weight that so easily entangles us, and the sin which so easily entangles us. Let us lay it aside. Many of us don't make it far in faith simply because we have not dealt with the things in our lives that need to get dealt with. And I'm not just talking about sin. I'm talking about things that we carry that God never meant for us to carry. But the author is telling us this in the sense of a race. He's appealing to competition imagery. And what he's really saying is this: you wouldn't start a race at a disadvantage. You wouldn't be at the starting line. And could you imagine? I have a friend who, if he's listening to this, his name's Mike Peterson. He will put a backpack on and he'll put rocks in his backpack. He'll put extra weight in there so that way he can get a really good workout. That's probably why he's in better shape than I am, and that's totally okay with me. But he does that, and he goes on walks and he'll go on a run with this extra weight in order to get a good workout. But if he were going on a race, he wouldn't do that. If it was a competition, you wouldn't do something like that. Imagine starting a race and putting on some ankle weights, putting on some carrying some dumbbells. You just wouldn't do that. You would be starting the race at a disadvantage. And that's what the author is telling us. If you don't deal with the weight and get rid of the things you need to get rid of, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage in your Christian walk as you follow Jesus. That's what the author wants you to know. And the word for weight is this word encumbrance, but in the Greek, it's actually referring to this idea of like a mass or something that is protruding off of you. It gives this imagery of like a tumor, something that doesn't belong there. And that is what I want to tell you today. You need to get rid of things in your life that do not belong. For some of you, it might be like a responsibility or a weight that you've been carrying that God never asked you to carry. Maybe you're carrying the weight of a decision. You're carrying the weight of something that happened to you. You're carrying a burden for something that God never gave you a burden for. And I think you need to lay that aside today. I think that's the thing that's been hindering you from truly following Jesus. Maybe for you, it's not necessarily a burden or a weight, but there's sin in your life that you need to deal with. It's hard to follow Jesus when you are doing the very thing he asked you not to do. When you're doing the very thing that put him on the cross. You see, if you're chasing sin, you can't chase Jesus. He's telling you to get rid of the weight, get rid of the thing that is hindering you from following it. I'll never forget in my own walk with Jesus, when I got really serious about my faith, and there was this moment where God called me into ministry. If you've listened to the podcast, you've probably heard the story before, but God called me into ministry, and the first thing he did was not put a microphone in my hand. He did not put me on a stage. In fact, the first thing that God began to do in my life when I said yes to going into ministry was he began to prune my life. He began to deal with the sin in my life. He took his big scissors, his shears, and started getting rid of all the branches that did not belong there so that way I could be a healthy version of me. So that way I could actually do what he called me to do. You see, if you want to live this life faithfully, if you want to follow Jesus, not just for the short term, but for the long term, then you have to drop the weight of sin. You need to drop the burdens that he never asked you to carry. And many of us, the burdens and things that we're carrying are because we spend too much time looking at our phone. We're too busy carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. We're hearing about new viruses, and we're hearing about crimes and all the things that are so bad in our society, and we're carrying the weight of all of that. But God never told us to carry that weight. He didn't. We need to drop the weight so that we can truly follow Jesus. The only thing that Jesus told us to carry was this. He said, deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow him. If you want to carry something, carry the cross he's given you, not the cross he gave to somebody else. Somebody else has a different calling. And by the way, the cross that you are to pick up is simply the calling that he's giving you. It's simply the life that he has placed you in to live. That is what you are to do. He didn't call you to be somebody else. He didn't call you to look like somebody else. He didn't call you to copy someone else. He called you to be you. And so carry that cross, not the cross that you want to, not the cross that you think is going to get you the most followers, it's going to get you the most success. Carry the cross he's asked you to carry. Some of you today, you simply need to lay aside the weight that you've been carrying. You need to get rid of the sin that so easily entangles you. Secondly, and I think one of the reasons that many of us don't follow Jesus for the long term, we only make it in short spurts. And here's the whole inspiration for this episode today. I want you to follow Jesus for your whole life. I don't want just a few years here and then maybe a few years down the road. I want you to be a healthy, faithful follower of Jesus for your whole life. And in fact, when you follow Jesus faithfully, people will see God in you. But what people have a hard time with, and is what has caused so much damage in the church, is people who say they follow Jesus, but then live the exact opposite. You and I need to be faithful followers of Jesus. And here's the second reason why a lot of people end up leaving the faith and end up not following Jesus for the long haul. It's because they have their eyes fixed in the wrong place. Verse 2 in Hebrews chapter 12 says this: fixing your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. The author is telling us this: if you want to follow Jesus, you must look to Jesus. And there's two reasons to this. The first reason I'll give you is this, that if Jesus is the author of our faith, he's the example of our faith, and we are to emulate him, how can we do that if we do not look to him? You see, your life is going to move in the direction of your strongest thought. Your life is going to look like the things you look at, the things you consume. And so if you are looking to Jesus, odds are your life will look like Jesus. You need to look to him. You need to read the scriptures. You need to see what he did. You need to see how he spoke. You need to see how he taught. You need to look to Jesus in order to live this life out. Have you ever been driving before? Maybe you're like me. I got kids, and actually just this last summer, we went on a pretty long road trip down to Arizona. We went to Disneyland. It was an incredible road trip. But here's what I found myself doing a lot on the road trip is I was the food distributor. Whether I was in the driver's seat or in the passenger seat, it didn't matter. I was constantly doing one of these. If you're watching this on video, reaching my hand to the back seat, trying to hand over whatever food my kids wanted in that moment. And here's what happened every time, not every time, but many times when I reached my hand over the seat, my eyes would shift one way or the other, and all of a sudden my car would start to drift off in that direction as I turned my whole body. Why is that? Because where I am looking is where I will go. Where your eyes are fixed is where you will move to. I think that's a principle that's true, and I think that's what the author of Hebrews is trying to tell us. If you fix your eyes on Jesus, you should be okay. But if you have your eyes fixed on the world, if you have your eyes fixed on success, on fame, on influence, here's the thing. You will probably find what you're looking for. But what if you miss Jesus along the way? If you have your eyes fixed on fame, you'll probably find it. But you might miss what God has for you. You might miss the calling that he's giving you. You might miss the blessings that he has in store for you. You must fix your eyes on Jesus. I love the story of Peter in the New Testament when he sees Jesus from afar. They actually think it's a ghost walking to them on the water. But then Peter calls out and says, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you." And so Jesus says, "Peter, come to me." And Peter begins to step out of the boat and walk to Jesus. And it's very powerful imagery here. I know you've probably heard this story preached, but it's so powerful. Peter is looking at Jesus and he's walking on the water. But then the Bible makes a note to say this, that Peter saw the wind and the waves around him. And as soon as he took his eyes off Jesus, I don't know if he looked away, but the Bible makes it a point to say that he noticed the wind and the waves and the storm that were encompassing him. And in that moment, he sank. But when he had his eyes fixed on Jesus, he was able to walk through the storm. He was able to do what he needed to do. He was able to follow Jesus when Jesus had told him to come to him. That's what you and I need. The reason that many of us leave the faith, that we don't make it for the long haul, is because our eyes are fixed everywhere else. And I don't think I need to tell you this, but I think the truth is that in 2026, everything is vying for your attention. Everything wants you to look at it. Social media wants your attention. The entertainment, Netflix, Disney, it wants your attention. Other people want your attention. Jobs want your attention. And I'm not saying those things are bad things, but even a good thing that wants your attention, that takes your attention away from the best thing, is a bad thing. Our eyes must be fixed on Jesus. Must be fixed on Jesus. And here's what I love. Here's what I love, because it tells us that not only are our eyes supposed to be fixed on Jesus, but Jesus' eyes were already fixed on us way before we ever looked to him. It says, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. You've probably heard it preached, but you and I were the joy that was set before Jesus. He is already looking to you. James chapter 4 would tell us this, that when you draw near to God, God will draw near to you. And the emphasis on that is not the fact that God's drawing near. It's the fact that you would actually draw near to God first, and then God's already waiting for you to be there. He's already ready for you. His eyes are fixed on you. And really what I think the author is trying to tell us is that when you start a race, because again, he's appealing to this competition imagery. When you start a race, you have your eyes fixed on the prize. Jesus is the prize. He is the reward. More of him is the reward for faithful living. In fact, that's literally what heaven is. More of God. When you graduate from this life into eternity, you will receive God in his fullness. He is the prize. You must keep your eyes on the prize as you run this race of faith. Fix your eyes on Jesus today. Fix your eyes on him. Lastly, I would say one other reason that I think people bow out of the faith early is because they lack endurance. They lack endurance. The author would tell us this in verse 1, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Some of us, we don't have the ability to do hard things. And I'm so sorry to maybe be the first one to tell you that, but you need to be able to do hard things if you want to follow Jesus. You need to be able to endure when times get hard. You need to be able to continue on in what you're doing when it's not going your way. So here's the question. How do we endure? How do we endure? I'm going to give you two things, maybe not super practical, but the first thing I think is actually very, very helpful. If you go back to chapter 11, I already mentioned this, it's what's called the Faithful Hall of Fame. And it talks about all of the faithful saints who have gone before us. Guys like Abraham, Sarah, Rahab, all these people who model and demonstrate faith that you and I would want to model and demonstrate. And he lists all of these people, and then it gets to Hebrews chapter 12 and says, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Here's what the author is saying. I want you to picture again the competition imagery, because even in the Bible times, they had competitions, they had Olympics, they had all of the things that were happening. They would literally put gladiators in the middle of an arena, and they would watch guys fight wild animals to the death. They'd watch people fight people to the death. Like this is the imagery that's being appealed to. That there is a crowd around us cheering us on, encouraging us. And let me make the caveat here, because the people cheering us on are not just like your dad watching the Super Bowl saying something like, when they see a wide receiver drop a pass, they could have been like, I would have caught that pass. That quarterback sucks. Okay, your dad's like 20 pounds overweight and probably eating a bowl of chips and salsa or something. Like, he's not catching that. He's not making that pass. But what the author of Hebrews is telling us is you don't just have a crowd of witnesses surrounding you who have no idea what you're going through. You actually have a crowd of witnesses who has already gone before you, who has done the hard thing, who has completed the race. That should encourage you to know that there are people who have done the very thing that you're trying to do. They've lived a long life and they've honored God in it. That's what he's saying. If they can do it, so can you. If they can honor God in the tough and difficult times, so can you. You are surrounded by a cloud of witnesses. Therefore, run your race with endurance. I remember when I was in high school and I was on the 4x400 track team or 4x400 relay team, we got to go to state. It was a wonderful time my sophomore year. And here's what I loved about the 4x400 meter relay. It was always the last event at every meet. And what would really happen is your whole team would gather around that last corner of the 100 meters. So you would run 300 meters and it's about at the last 100 meters where your body starts to lock up and you literally feel like you can't run anymore. But on that last stretch, as you come around that corner into the last 100 meters of the race, your team would be there cheering you on. And the people on the field at this corner were not your family members. They were not your grandparents. It was your team that has been competing all day, that has been running the races all day. They are there cheering you on, and it gives you just that last boost to finish the race that you started. This is the imagery that the author wants you to see, that there is a crowd of witnesses who has surrounded you, who has gone before you, and who survived. I like to think of it like this, because when you have a crowd of witnesses cheering you on, I would call that you have the home court advantage. And let me just say this, in the grand scheme of heaven and hell and walking this life for Jesus, you have home court advantage everywhere you go. When you step into your workplace, I don't care if nobody on that job is a believer, you have home court advantage. When you step into your school, I don't care if none of your classmates follow Jesus, you have home court advantage. Why? Because you are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. You have home court advantage. And when you have home court advantage, you're not going to lose because God is with you. And if God be for you, who can be against you? The second thing I would urge you to do is this: when life gets hard, when you feel like you just can't keep moving forward, not only should you consider those who have gone before you, you should consider Jesus. Verse 3 of Hebrews chapter 12 says, "Consider him who has already endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." The antidote to growing weary is to consider Jesus. Consider what he endured. Think about that. Reflect on that. Consider the suffering of Jesus. Consider the patience of Jesus. Consider the endurance that Jesus had. Consider the fact that Jesus himself took upon himself every sin, every illness, everything, and would pay an unjust death for you and for me. Consider Jesus. Jesus would say this in Matthew 11:28, "Come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give them rest. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." You see, if your stamina is failing, if you feel like you cannot keep moving forward, I beg you, I urge you, consider Jesus. Don't take your hard life to Instagram, to social media. Don't take it to friends who are just going to tell you to keep doing the wrong things and to keep medicating with substances and you need to do you, boo. No. Take it to Jesus. Consider Jesus. And when you do that, I promise you, the Bible says this, that those who wait on the Lord, their strength will be renewed. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. But you got to go to Jesus. You got to wait on the Lord. In fact, he's the only one who died for you, and he is the only one who can get you through this life. You see, many of us bow out of faith. We don't make it for the long haul simply because we haven't dropped the weight, we haven't fixed our eyes, and we haven't been able to do hard things. But I pray that this episode has encouraged you. And if any of these have spoken to you, if you feel like, Austin, you've helped to diagnose the problem in my life, and I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to fix my eyes somewhere else. I'm going to drop the weight. I'm going to go to Jesus. If that's happening for you, would you just leave a comment? Would you send me a DM? Let me know. I want to know that this has encouraged you. This has helped you, because I believe that this could save you some heartache if we could just get these things right. My God, what an episode. And 3 weeks in a row, we've dropped an episode. So, I mean, this is just unprecedented times we're living in right now. But I'm so grateful you tuned in to this episode today. If there's anything that you want to hear about, if there's any questions you have, again, send me a DM, leave a comment, leave a like, review, rating, all of the things. I'm so grateful for you who listen to this podcast. But that's all we got for you today. So we will see you right back here next week.